I would love to start to kind of find out where you all are as far as having a team. I'm not sure if any of you have one. So if I could just hear really briefly from everyone, because I think that'll help me a little bit with the presentation, if you're just kind of working solo right now, or if you actually have a team with your product or service. I've got Janet first on my screen. So Janet, did you want to start?
Sure. I was working with a chef who is helping develop the product, the initial product. And I've reached out to I haven't hired anybody, and actually did hire her as a consultant and give her and provided a consulting fee and job description and whatnot. The role is now done because the product is virtually complete. And then on the side, I've done just like a lot of similar to CLA, just like a lot of sort of like advising in certain areas of the business that I feel like I needed support on, but no hires.
Okay, great. Sorry, my screen. Does anyone want to share next? Blanca, I think you have some sort of team, right?
As of right now, for the business aspect I want to launch, I do not have a team, but the nonprofit I work at have been very supportive. So when I do launch this business or I get started with a little stand, I could reach out to past interns or alumni and possibly hire them, or even the staff that's currently working there. I'll be happy to get them to assist me with sales or doing mini events. But as of right now, I'm launching the business on my own.
Okay, great. What else do we have here? Miko? Oh, Stephanie. Didn't see you. Stephanie, right?
I'm working solo at the moment.
Okay.
So just like getting contractors if there's something to do, but it's really like graphic design.
Okay, great. Miko, what about you? Are you working solo?
Yeah, I'm working solo now. Because I'm at the very beginning stage now, but I have kind of friends who wants to help me, and my husband is also supporting me too.
Okay. Who else? Tracy.
It's just me right now, but I like Amiko's idea that I might have help with my husband.
Oh, okay, got it. So I think that's everyone. Great, okay. Maybe Lynn, can we go to the next slide? Okay, so the presentation is going to focus on two different aspects of your team. First, assembling the team, and then managing your team. And they are very distinct, although they are related. So, y'all are at the beginning stages. And so you can start thinking about the things that you will ultimately need to do to assemble your team. And I have to tell you just at the outset that I love this presentation because I didn't know any of this when we started our business, and I learned it along the way. And I think it's so beneficial to know all this info going in. I mean, it's sort of like you think it's intuitive, but then when you're actually going through it, like it's not as intuitive as you think, and you really have to be intentional with your team. So let's look at assembling the right team first. So first, define your mission and goal. Now, this is really important because although you know your mission and goal, kind of putting it out there, like in writing will change the way you talk about it. And you need to communicate that to people that you are potentially hiring. Like, who are you? What are you? And what is your business trying to do? Because that informs them, like that they're making the right decision on coming on with you, and that they understand at the outset what your goals are and what your mission is. So once you do that, you can look at what skills you need to fill in and match the people that you find with those skills. And this relates a lot to number 3, I think find people who are not like you, because a lot of times at the beginning, the skills we're trying to fill are not the skills that we have, right? It's like because at the beginning, we're not hiring a team of like 10 people right away necessarily. I mean, that may happen, but usually it's a slow onset. And I found at the beginning stages, like hiring somebody that has the skills you don't can be the best way to accelerate your business forward. And that may be people who are not like you, and they may be like you, but for example, some people are really good at the business side of business, and some people are really good at the customer facing side of business. And oftentimes those people have different personalities and are very unlike each other. And I think in business, we often have an inclination to hire people who are like us because it's comfortable, right? And because we speak the same language, or it's just easier to work together. And while, having a good working relationship is super important, it's really important to have people that are going to kind of tell you the truth, right? And disagree with you sometimes, because that can really build you, And so having people from all like different personalities, different backgrounds can help you match up all the skills that you're looking to fill in with your business. Coachable. So even if you're bringing someone in that has a skill that you don't have, you are the leader of this team. And so you have to make sure that you're hiring people and assembling people who are willing to learn from you and from each other, and aren't so set in their own ways that they're like, this is just the way it's done and I'm not going to bend because I have experience or I have this. Now, you also have to be coachable, right? Like it goes both ways. Like they can coach you and you can coach them, but you want to make sure the people you assemble are willing to make changes based on your mission and your values. And that's sort of related to willing to be a team player. Obviously, teams have to work together. And sometimes, especially when you're starting a business, you carry, like think about all the hats that you wear. Like the initial people you hire will also wear more than one hat. That just happens naturally in small businesses and getting started. So people that are willing to sort of go outside their comfort zone, to work together, to take on things that maybe are a little unexpected. I mean, I'm not saying like crazy stuff. I'm just saying people who are like willing to do what needs to be done to make the business work. Ethics align with your business culture. So as you move forward in your business, your team is going to represent you. And you may not always be there when your team is representing you. And so it's really important that if you were coming up to this team member as a customer, not knowing the owner, would this person communicate and comply with the ethics of your business culture because they are representing you? Do they represent you, right? It's kind of like what we talked about last week with the customer relationships and customer facing situations. Like, would they act in a way that matches your business culture? And this is sometimes something you have to see as people work, because sometimes what you hear in like maybe an interview or an initial meeting may not be what you end up seeing. And so that's just something to think about. This part also, you have to communicate your ethics and your culture in order for people to understand them. So you can't expect people to just understand what needs to be done, understand what you want, unless you communicate that to them in the initial parts of their hiring process. So diversity, obviously, like super important. We're in LA, like your group. I mean, I don't really need to tell this to this group as much as maybe other groups, but also diversity in thought. Like, diversity doesn't just mean background and the way we look and all these other things, like diversity in the way that people think, because that's what creates ideas that you didn't think about, right? And that adds to your business. And even if you may not agree with them, like I always appreciate people coming with ideas, even if I don't think they're good ideas, because the fact that they're thinking about that and giving me ideas is because sometimes they're great ideas. Or they make me think about my business in a different way than I hadn't thought about. And that can be really, really beneficial. Okay, move to the next one. Okay, so fostering a strong sense of teamwork. So, you are the leader of your team, and I would encourage you all to really think about how you are as a leader. And if you're somebody that hasn't managed teams before, like this you will learn along the way. But I think it's really beneficial to think about who you are as a leader and what your strengths and weaknesses are, because I think we have to be self-critical also, like what do we need to do as leaders to make sure we're leading this team properly? And so we have to be willing to grow as well. So like really even just writing down, like, what are your leadership qualities? And you may or may not know these, but you can figure them out by your previous interactions with friends. If you have kids, you can kind of tell what your leadership qualities are. And we've all led in some way or another in your relationships or in business. And so once you figure out what your strengths and weaknesses are, you can really focus on tuning them to make sure that you become the strongest leader you can. This definition here is amazing. I also think, in addition to vision and systems and focus and tools, really being somebody that can, relate to their team members, because just like customers, relationships, like the personal relationships, or the connection between you and your team is really what creates the best sense of teamwork, of loyalty, of people like promoting your brand and carrying your brand in the best way. Because when people have a connection to the people they work for, that creates, they just want to do better, right? It makes them feel like they're a part of something versus like just another person, an employee, like a W-2 employee, which, people just don't feel as strong of a connection. And you might know from your own experiences, like you're just less likely to be as intentional in carrying on the vision of the brand. Okay, I'm going to the next one. Okay, so these are, once you've assembled your team, now you get to manage them. And these are sort of the different components that you will be thinking about when you come up with your management plan and when you start managing your team. And this may start with just one person. It may start with more than one person, right? And even for those of you who are like kind of working with a few people, or like Amiko said, you're working with your husband. Like I also started my business with my husband, but you guys are actually a team, and it's important to think of it that way. Like those people, those friends and close family members that are helping you, you have to make sure you're also paying attention to these different things. Not that you're managing them, but when you're interacting with them, because it's really important to also give respect to people that are just helping, and give them the same respect you would give your team. And the same, communication that you would give your team. Okay, so we can go down to the next one, make a plan. Okay. Okay, so provide purpose, goals, and expectations for the team. So this is sort of like the initial thing you need to do. You've assembled your team. And now you're kind of going to go through your management process. What do you want out of them, right? What are they here for? I mean, they all have different jobs. So what's the large thing they're here for? That's like your mission and your purpose. And then what are their individual job requirements? And goals and expectations, right? And so I actually did written job descriptions for people. I didn't do it at the beginning, but as we moved forward, I would do that when I initially hired people, because that, even though you talk about it in an interview and you sort of go through it when they first start, like really being able to have that thing that they can go back to and see, like, these are my expectations, this is my job description, can really help in setting clear purpose and expectations for your team. Be clear, again, like very clear about what you would want your what your expectations are for your team, what their job description is. And if things change, be clear about that change, right? If they're taking on something different, if they move to a different division, like go through it with them again. So everyone is clear on what the requirements are. Priorities. So this can be really important when somebody has more than one job, right? And so a lot of times with food or with events or with a brick and mortar, people have more than one job. And so which one do they need to do first, right? If it's extremely busy and they have to do only one, which one? And you kind of prioritize it and go down the list, because this isn't always intuitive. Like, what the priorities are, and they may get to know them as they work with you longer. But it can be a little bit of a hairy process if you don't set it out in the beginning. And it also provides them with some sort of ease, because they are coming in with a clear expectation, with a clear structure, and kind of knowing what is expected of them and what they need to do, versus coming in and it's like they're being trained, but they don't really know on what, and they don't know what they're supposed to be doing. And it just creates an atmosphere that's a little bit messy, and you don't want to start with that atmosphere that's messy. You want to start with something strong and clear. Okay, trust your team to do their job. This is really hard. This is harder than you think for people who are entrepreneurs, because all of us have created our own business, which means we care about it a lot and we're very particular about it. And it's sometimes hard to let people in and do it for you and do a portion of it for you. But if you don't delegate it and you don't trust them, they will feel that, right? And that will tell them where they are in your business and how much trust you have in them. Now, there's different levels of delegation. When you first hire someone, obviously you're a lot more involved, and you can tell them that, look, for the first couple of months, I'm going to be right here with you. But my expectation and my hope is that after that time period passes and you're comfortable, you can take on more responsibility and just come to me if you need something, right? And that tells them, okay, that's why this person is kind of shadowing me. It's not that they don't trust me, but they're training me, and it will end, and I will be able to take on the responsibility myself. It doesn't mean that you're not still managing them when you delegate. Like, you're still managing them, but there are certain things that they're doing on their own without you having input in every detail of it, right? And you want to create an atmosphere where they feel comfortable doing it, they feel confident doing it, but they also feel confident that they can come to you if they need to, right? And not feel like, oh, I should know how to do that already. I don't want to go to Tracy with that question because she's going to be really mad that I, don't know how to do that yet. It's got to be open, honest. Everybody, people unlearn things all the time. We do it too, right? People forget things. So just to create that atmosphere where there's open communication is the best way to create trust, and also will help you, because as you delegate, if there is an issue, this person is going to come to you because they feel comfortable with you. And they feel comfortable with being honest about, like, this is a mistake I made and what should I do in this situation? Versus feeling like they're going to get fired because they did something wrong, right? Okay, next slide. Team culture. So as much as the relationship between you and your team is important, that the relationship amongst your team is also really important. People love working with people that they feel connected to also, right? Because they are going to be there with other people, and creating a team culture doesn't necessarily just happen by putting people together in the same space for a few hours a day, right? Taking initial steps at the beginning and during, at the beginning when the team is created, and then as you go along will help cement it and create a culture where people feel like they're part of the team. So, the first thing about the team is that they're all working towards the same goal, right? So meeting regularly, like, this is so important, even when you have nothing to meet about, because you're creating a situation where everybody on the team is getting together in the same spot, which doesn't always happen because people work at different times and they have different jobs. They may be in different areas. You may see some team members more than others just by virtue of what their job is. And so meeting regularly, it doesn't have to be every day. It doesn't have to be every week, but it should be something where they know, like, we're going to meet regularly. Now, we would do team meetings and also one-on-one meetings, like quarterly or bi-quarterly with individual team members. And we would do something twofold. We would talk to them about like how they're doing, but we would also ask them what we can do better to create like a mutually beneficial experience for them, because it's not just about what your team can do for you. It's also like it's also about what you can do for your team and how you can make the working environment, good for them. This may not be like their career choice, right? It may not be like their full-time job, right? And so, they have their own things going on that are outside of you. And so just creating that atmosphere where they don't feel like, oh, I'm just here to do my job for this person, and there's no give back and forth. Creating leaders, and this really goes to empowering and delegating. You create leaders by giving them the power to show you that they can do something well, and then they could take it on. We would often like hire people and then make them in charge of something. Even if it was something small, and that would be their, they would own it, right? And it would change depending on the person and their background and what we thought they could handle. But we would also tell them, like, what do you want to take on? Is there something you think that we can do? And does it make sense for you to take them on? Take that on. Getting to know your team, like that's the relationship part. Ask them, getting to know them, getting to know about their life, understanding why they're here. And understand what their life is outside of, your company. It doesn't have to get super, super personal. It's just something that creates, like a bond between people. We would do the same with amongst our team members, like we would do outings, I don't know, like miniature golfing, or like twice a year we would do something fun amongst the team, and we would take everyone, and that just like creates a situation where you're interacting in a place that has nothing to do with work or your company. Like, just, okay, you really learn a lot about people when you take them out of their work atmosphere, right? And they're just people and having fun and interacting. Provide feedback, again, that goes to just regularly letting them know how they're doing, and also getting that feedback back to you. Promoting a culture of learning. People will learn a lot better if they're allowed to make mistakes and they're allowed to learn from them. Kind of goes back to what I was saying before, but just, asking them questions that in a way that shows that you're learning from them also, right? So sometimes your team members become more customer facing than you, because they're, like, you're in the back and you're doing stuff and you're managing stuff, but they're up there in the front talking to customers. What can you learn about your customers from them? What can you learn from your team members about your space, about your product, about what you can do better, about ideas to innovate, things like that. It's always worth to ask. People like to be asked questions, and to feel like they have an important part and place in the team. Team building activities are great. It kind of goes to like having outings, but when you have a new team member come on, like, do a meeting, do some icebreakers. I know they're corny, but they work. Just small things to connect people and create, small relationships amongst all of you. Okay, next slide. So mutual respect and trust. So like I was saying, your team members are going to have all different sorts of positions in your company. And there may be people that are like, you may hire someone that is super, super into exactly what you're doing with your company. This is what they want to do with their career. They're very invested. They want to spend all their time thinking about it and doing it. And you may have somebody else who works for you 10 hours a week and is not that interested in what you're doing, aside from like they buy into the culture, but it's really just a job for them, you know, and that's okay. You're going to have people like that, especially in food, in the food service industry. You cannot expect everybody to be like 100% foodie, way into it, like way into the culture all the time. You have to understand that there will be people from varied backgrounds with varied life situations. And, you know, their whole lives may not be working for you. I think as entrepreneurs, it's easy to think that, although I think people are better with it, like, than it used to be, about having like a work-life balance and understanding people have lives outside of it. But sometimes when you're really in it, when you're an entrepreneur and you're really in it and you're living and breathing in it, it's hard to set yourself back and think about that. So model the behavior, be a part of the, you know, you want everyone to be part of the team, but you also want to acknowledge they have their own lives. They may have bad days, just like you do, right? You know, how do you deal with that? And, you know, they will deal with it how you deal with it, right? And, you know, sort of using their, you know, that's the wrong way of saying it. So if their whole life isn't just being at this cafe or working with your product, like what do they have outside of it? And how can you talk to them about it? Like, oh, you're a musician. That's great. Like, do you have any shows? Or, you know, make them feel like you are actually interested in them, aside from them just working for you, right? You're interested in them as a person. Also understand everybody has different levels when they come in. You may have two people that have both worked in a restaurant, but they were different kinds. And so when you're in there and you're training them, you may see differences, and just understand like you can still train people to do what needs to be done. And not everyone is going to have the same sort of talent around what you're hiring them for. Even if they both can do it, they may do it differently. Everybody does things differently. So just having the patience with that and understanding of that, because you can train them both to do what needs to be done. You just may have to have a little more patience with one than the other, because of their experiences. Yeah, so that actually led perfectly to this. Be consistent, but use different approaches. You know, you're going to get every type of personality on your team, right? Depending on how big it is, like you're going to get a lot of different personalities. And I think that when we get people that have the same personality as us, it makes it really easy to like gravitate towards them and think that they're doing a much better job, and it just makes it like a better working environment for them. But just understand, like everybody has their gifts and everyone's motivated by different things, and understanding every person's motivation can be a great way to make sure that they're elevating to their level. So different work styles, different types of leadership. Some people are natural born leaders and they'll come out and they'll kind of take over, and that's great. Some people are a lot quieter, but they may also be leaders. It just needs to be brought out of them, right? And once it's brought out, they can really lead. And so just having patience with that. And I think just taking the time to get to know their styles and the patience that it takes to do that is really important, because it does take working with them sometimes to understand their style, right? When somebody comes in for an interview with you, like you're going to hear what you want to hear for the most part, right? I mean, people know how to interview, and they're going to tell you maybe what they need to get the job. You really learn a lot more from people by working with them. So make sure that when you hire someone, you're taking the time to train them, to really get to know them and to work with them so you can understand their style, aside from what they tell you their style is. And you may find out it's different and they're better suited for a different task, or they're still suited for this task, or, you know, we'll approach this in a different way, you know, whatever it is. Somebody's better at opening because they are really on it in the morning. I mean, little details like that really do make a difference, like understanding people's working styles and schedules and things like that. But at the same time, consistency. So you don't want it to be a situation where you're like giving favoritism to one person over the other, or you are being really inconsistent in the expectations. You can have consistent overall expectations, but then tailor a little bit more on the details. Does anyone have any questions so far? No? Okay. Accountability. So this one is like it says, lead by example. Like if you take accountability for the things that you do in your business, so will other people. And if you're verbal about that, right? Like, you're talking to a customer and you say something that you wish you hadn't, or you say something wrong. And then after that customer leaves, they're talking to your team like, oh, I made a mistake there. I did this. I shouldn't have done that. Like, it's almost like, for those of you who have kids, like showing your kids that you also make mistakes and then you're accountable for them. I mean, just because of the power dynamic and being a manager, sometimes making it softer and making your team understand, like you have this, you're still a person, you have the same, you make mistakes, you wish you had done things differently. And showing that to them will make it more likely that they will come to you when there needs to be accountability, right? And it could be like, accountability could be a lot of things. It could be the money is off in the register. Like, I don't know what happened to it. And, or something happened with this customer, or I was late, but I'm going to lie about why I was late over and over because I don't want to tell you the real reason, that kind of thing. And holding someone accountable, that's like just really a case by case situation, because you have to show your team they are going to be held accountable, but that doesn't mean they can't make mistakes, if that makes sense, right? So finding that balance where you're holding yourself and your team accountable, but you're still allowing people to grow and to grow in the business. It can be a little bit of something like you'll just find it over time. But, I think just creating that initial open line of communication is the best way of keeping accountability. And accountability will look different for different team members. Like you may have somebody who's an amazing team member in every way, but they are never on time to work. Right. And so sometimes it's easy when you have somebody like that to say like, well, at least they are great when they're here. And I'm just going to overlook it because I don't want to lose this person. Right. It doesn't mean that you're going to fire them, but maybe you do need to hold them accountable, because other people will also see that. Other team members will see that. Right. And they need to see that everyone's being held accountable, because that will motivate them to just do a better job and to be more bought into the product, the company, the brand, and to you. Does that make sense? Any questions there? Okay, we can go to the next one. Oh, my favorite one. How many times have I said communication? It's just really the key to your team. Like, and it's easy not to do it. I know it sounds like it's not, but even if you're somebody who communicates really well, when you're in the day-to-day of doing your business, there's a lot to do. There's a lot to do, and you're managing it and you're leading it. And it's pretty easy to just not say what needs to be said, or not keep the communication lines open because you're busy. And, but you've got to let people know how they're doing. You've got to know how you're doing. And you've got to kind of hold the position where you're like, you can communicate with me anytime. I'm not too busy to hear this. I'm not too busy to talk to you about this. And, assume that people want to know. Definitely assume that people want to know how they're doing. It doesn't have to be, if it's negative feedback, it doesn't have to be done in a way that makes people feel bad. I mean, the way you communicate is also really important. And I think for some people, it was hard for me naturally, because I don't really love confrontation, to understand how to like really just confront something head on and realize I could do it in a way that was not confrontational. It's not, I mean, people are like you are their team leader, they're expecting feedback, and doing it in a way that really still makes them feel like they're part of the team and there's mutual respect always. But, letting them know truthfully how they're doing, or if something needs to change, or if they're doing great. It's okay to give positive feedback for no reason, right? Not to focus on the negative, to focus on the positive. So what you don't want to do is be really annoyed about something or feel like something needs to change, but not say anything, because that doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help your team member. It doesn't help you. And they can feel it. They will feel it in the end based on your disposition towards them. So best to just get things out there. And that's another reason we would do the regular one-on-ones, because if we weren't so good at telling people every day or on a weekly basis, we would get that chance once a quarter to sit down and we would all be able to sort of talk about things. So if you're not good at doing this regularly, especially important to set those regular meetings with your team members. Hey, Bleen?
Sorry, couldn't unmute myself. So if I may, there is also like this, there are different approaches of how to do give feedback. There is one really common, it's called the sandwich approach, in which you start saying like something positive to a person, like, hey, I really like the way you interacted with this customer or so and so. But, and then you put in like your observation of whatever feedback you're given, and you finish with something positive, or maybe perhaps asking a question. Is there a way, as Tina has said before, is there a way that in which we can support you, or how do you think you can do better next time, or why? Asking something like, what was it that make you react that way, or something like that. That way people feel like, yes, you're pointing out something negative, but you're giving them an opportunity to better off themselves. And who doesn't want to be better in general in life? Just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I love that. The different ways that you can sort of let people know how they're doing, one way or the other. And I would say with the communication, like, also to foster communication amongst your team. So to create an environment where team members are working together and are free to ask, like to lean on each other as resources, especially when you're not there, is really important. And that's up to you to create an atmosphere where everybody is kind of working together, even if they're not doing the same task or the same job. And so, because a lot of times also, it's not just the communication with you, like if sometimes people are unhappy at work, or there's an issue with another person they're working with that's not you, right? So keeping the lines of communication open between team members, so like, I guess, horizontally and vertically, keeping all the lines of communication open, I think is the best way to just make sure that that your team members feel like they really can be open and communicative about their jobs. Okay, next slide, please. Development and growth. This one is, will vary across each of your organizations, depending on what they are and what the person on your team is doing. But there's a lot of different ways that you can foster it. So the first thing you can do is, if somebody is hired for one task, think about providing the ability for them to move amongst different things. For example, at our cafe, we had baristas, but we also had chefs, and we also had cashiers, and we had different stations, right? And so everybody had their strength, but we cross-trained on everything, even if one person ultimately ended up doing only one thing, for two reasons. First of all, it's really important that people can do more than one thing, because sometimes people don't show up to work, people get sick, you get busy, like you need people to be able to do more than one thing. But also that provides training for them that they can, use in different ways in the future, or maybe even professionally. So that's the cross training. The in-service training, there's a lot of certifications that people can getting food, like for example, getting food handler certified, right? So in your organization, you may not have to have everybody be be manager certified. Like the laws are different, but sometimes you only need one manager certification, one person with the manager certification at the brick and mortar at a time, but providing the ability for everyone to get it, to increase their knowledge. And, maybe you pay for that. Like, I think it's $150 or something like that, and you provide that as one of the training things. Whatever your business is, thinking about ways to provide more training and more opportunities to your staff. Opportunities to grow within your organization. We always used to tell our staff, like, if you want to elevate, it's up to you. Like, the opportunity is there, because the truth is that with small businesses, it's so helpful to have people that want to grow the business and want to grow in the business, that you can almost always find a role for them. And, we would even tell people, because we have a cafe and we used to have events there. I say used to, because we're currently closed for renovation, but we have events there. We would have different activities, and we'd say, okay, we hired you, you're a musician. Like, maybe you can perform at the cafe. Like, maybe you can be charged of this open mic, like being creative and thinking about what people can do. Because when you give someone a leadership role, even if it's not exactly what they're doing every day, it just provides so much buy-in. It shows that you have confidence in them, to not only do their job, but to take on something else. And it shows them that you're also committed to them, just like they're committed to you. And so I think just anything you can think about for developing and growing, can really add to the employee morale. And also benefit you as an organization, because, when people grow in your organization, that benefits the organization itself, in addition to benefiting them. Okay, recognition. Again, this leads to buy-in. The food industry is notoriously understaffed. It just is. There's a lot of jobs in the food industry, and once you find somebody that's an amazing team member, you do not want them to leave. And so it is like, you want to think about what you can do to make sure that person knows how vital they are to your organization, and how much you appreciate them. Recognition can be a lot of different things. There's kind of like the old school employee of the month. There's just telling them. There's doing recognizing in team meetings, like like you can even go around the room and recognize each person for what they've done amazing since your last meeting. We didn't have employees of the month because we didn't have enough staff at that time, so it would be a little bit odd, but we would give like a gift certificate to like the employee that we felt like really did an amazing job that month. Or we would just you get to know them, and you figure out what would benefit them the most. Talking about them amongst employees is also a really great thing. So they're not only recognized, but like they're recognized amongst the whole team. Once you hire your staff, you'll get to know them, and you'll get to know what people need for their recognition. And along with recognition, just thinking of ways that you can really make the environment a place where people want to stay. And that really goes to everything we've talked about before, but also just adding your own unique touch on it and making it a place where people are feeling like, I really want to go there every day. Like, even if it's just a job, I really want to go there. I feel included. I feel important. I feel like I'm learning and I'm growing. And I feel like I'm being recognized for being a really great part of this organization. Those are the kinds of things that really, really make people want to stay. They've done studies that the number one thing that makes people stay in whatever position they're in is the people they work with. And it's the environment that they're in every single day that can make or break whether they want to stay there. Okay. Y'all ready to build a team? So first of all, does anyone have any specific questions? Either about what I said or on the worksheet, because I'm going to ask you just to do what you can. I know our next meeting is tomorrow. I don't know if any of you have already done it, but to sort of jot down some ideas on the worksheet. I'm going to do it differently than last week. I'm not going to go through like a worksheet per person. I think for this subject, the most beneficial thing to do is just talk about like all of the questions collectively, because we all have really different like places where we have questions about building a team. So if you all have any questions about the presentation first, I'd love to answer, or even about the worksheet, about any of the questions on the worksheet. That may help us have a great discussion tomorrow.
I have a question for I don't think I'm going to be able to make it tomorrow, so I do want to just like try to ask some questions now. I am in New York, so I'm on a different time zone, and I'm here with family, so it's going to be hard for me to schedule in another class. But anyways, I wanted to know, when do you suggest building, like, to start building a team? For even just someone like me who has just like one product, who might be just working a farmer's market as a vendor, when do you think would be like a good time to start thinking about building a team? And like, what kind of money should I be allotting to that, like payroll and stuff? I don't even know if that is a part of this segment, but yeah, just like curious what your thoughts were on that.
Yeah, I'm sure. So I think as far as allotting money, it depends on what kind of person you're going to bring on to your team first, right? And so sometimes when you're starting, you're bringing on somebody that's like doing something that is like of a different sort of level, like marketing, or like like Janet was saying, she brought a consultant on, for development, right? So things like that. Those you're going to budget more money for, because they are like more professional jobs. But in the beginning, normally it would be something like Janet did, which is like a consultant. It wouldn't be somebody that you bring onto your team fully. As far as when you bring on somebody, like most likely for you, Jasmine, like you will bring on somebody to help you work farmers markets, right? Or you will bring on somebody to like help with the packaging of your product, because now like you've gotten your product somewhere and you have to both work the farmers markets and make the product and package it. And so that, like, as far as setting like your normally that's an hourly gig. And so you just have to think about like, I mean, you have to follow the guidelines about what the minimum wages are and things like that. But like, if you're going to do more than minimum, like just thinking about that, what that means for your company. I mean, I would calculate it out monthly, because usually your profit and loss you will do on a monthly basis. And so just think about, okay, if I'm going to get 20 hours a week, this is how it's going to look for monthly, like for a monthly cost. And make sure you consider, there's calculators that do this online, that you consider taxes and things like that, because you will have to pay those once you W-2 to somebody. And so there's places online where you can kind of put in like, if I'm paying someone this much, these many hours a month, this is what my end result will be. So yeah, as far as when you do that, I mean, it's really when you feel like you need, either you need help, you need a skill that you don't have, and you need help with that, or you just need more help because you can't be in all the places, right? And so are you able to do what you need to do with just you, or do you need to bring on, and you don't have to bring on somebody full time. It can be like you bring on somebody 20 hours a week at the beginning, and then it grows from there.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, somebody has their hand raised, but it's off the screen. So is it Belinda?
Belinda, yeah.
It's me. Hi. I'm just curious, when you're setting up your training or hiring, do you set like a probationary period? So do you set a probationary period? And if so, what is your probationary period? And this is kind of compounded, but with that probationary period, and then at the end of that, and a person is not, not meeting up to par, right? As far as the expectations, the details, that the job description, maybe you've also, spoken with them or counseled them or coached them throughout that probationary period. The crux of this question is, when do you, if they're not meeting expectations, do you like, okay, if you didn't do this, unfortunately, we're gonna have to let you go? Or do you go with your heart? Like, when is it time to like let a person go when they're just not meeting, meeting?
That's a great question. We always set a probationary period. And that's because we just figured out with people coming in, like the expectation wasn't always what it was like to work in a restaurant, and I think that sometimes if you get people with more experience, like they understand, but there, we would sort of get this disposition that like hot and cool is really cool, and it seems like really cool to work there. I want to work there, but there's actually like you have to do things in a certain way there. And so we just decided after some time, we wanted to set the message out there that it needs to be mutually beneficial, and we would say mutually beneficial. So they also at any time could be like, and I'm firing you as my employee, right? Like it's got to be, and we would kind of, phrase it as, we want to make sure that you understand what it's like to be here, and you're comfortable with that. And then we're also comfortable. So, we would set it for 2 months. That was our period, because we just felt like it took that long to really know somebody and how they work. And we put in writing what our expectations were. And if it was like a real disaster from the beginning, we would let people go earlier. And that it's a really hard thing to do. It is my least favorite thing to do in owning a business, like period. I don't like it. But when we first started our business, there'd be some times where we really didn't let somebody go when we should have. And then it doesn't get any easier. And then you're just, dealing with, sometimes that behavior spreads to the rest of your team or whatever the problem is. Like it is a team, and the whole team is affected. And so maybe we let somebody stay on that just didn't have like a great attitude. Well, the rest of our team had to work with that person, and that's not great for them. So, if it wasn't working out, like the 2 months, what we would always do is actually we would raise our wage after 2 months, and that would kind of be like the indicator. And so maybe we started at minimum, but then we'd go up to like 18 at 2 months. And I mean, or whatever number it is. It doesn't have to be the wage, but that would just be, and you don't have to do anything after 2 months. You can just say, okay, now you're officially, you have to hire them anyways, just because of paperwork and stuff, but it's just kind of a marker that they know that is there.
Right.
That
so
tells
the benefits that go along with it, right? Like, whether it be insurance, because I don't know if you do insurance right away or after 90 days or 60 days, you do offer, those benefits. So there's something that they're working also towards. Like you said, it has to be, a good fit for you as a company, and then also there as an employee.
Right. And you're kind of just putting out there what people already know. I mean, anytime you go work for someone, unless you have a particular employment contract, like you can be let go at any time, right? But you're just putting it out there in a way. And I think putting it out there makes it like more comfortable. It's just communicating it. But Maybelline, did you have something to add to that?
It's more like a question, just maybe serve a little bit of clarification. When you say that you guys established like the 2 months period for kind of like to see if it works out, is this something that you guys write out like when you are doing the paperwork, like because you need to onboard them for like for the payroll and everything? So within that, is there like a I don't know, like a statement or something that you are on a probational period for 60 days, and from there your employment is going to become permanent, or how do you guys manage that?
Yeah, exactly. So you still have to onboard them because you still have, like, legally, you still have to onboard them onto payroll. And that's really important, for several reasons, just legally, but also, like, for example, eventually you'll have workman's comp insurance and it will only cover people who are on your payroll. So you don't want to have people working there who are not covered by workman's comp. For liability reasons, but yes, exactly. We would have like a contract with it that would say that there's probationary period for 2 months and then your employment becomes permanent. And maybe like, and you get health insurance and you get this, or it just becomes permanent. That's okay too. Like, it's just kind of making sure that it's working out for both of you. But depending on, what you're hiring them for and what your business is, you may not want to do that. It just depends. Just think about it for your own business. Because, in reality, you can hire someone and let them go if it's not working out. You don't have to put it out there communication wise. I just liked putting it out there because I wanted it to be, I'm kind of an over communicator that way. Like, I just want it to be out there. So, but you don't, you got to think about whether it's best for your business to do that.
I'm sorry, I just thought about something you just mentioned. What about like hiring someone as a contractor? Like, you may have mentioned it. I'm sorry if you did, but just that kind of goes in the same respect of temporary. But have you dealt with any? Have you done that before, whether it be a chef or, like you said, a marketing person that's doing the marketing but on a contract basis?
So we have done it with consultants that work outside of the space. Like, for example, someone to do marketing, someone to work on like a website. We didn't do it in the space because of the workman's comp issue. So, when you have the restaurant, our workman's comp only covered W-2 employees. And because there's a lot of things that can happen in a restaurant, we didn't feel comfortable hiring consultants in the cafe because if something happened, they would not be covered by our workman's comp. So it just depends on, you can definitely hire consultants. There are legal limitations on how long you can have a consultant and what exactly they can do. So you would have to check that because legally what they don't want you doing is like hiring someone and then paying them as a consultant to avoid taxes. Even if that's not your intention, there are some legal parameters around who you can have as a consultant and who you can't. So I just want to put that out there. So, you can't, like in California, there is a 1-year limitation on contractors, like 1 or 2 years. I can't remember, almost for any kind of contractor. So it's just the way the law is. It's a great question though. Janet?
I'm wondering if you can just briefly speak to like your general outlook on like the interviewing process and how you approach it and like what kind of questions you ask, or just depending on like what role you're trying to fill, like how you navigate through that process, if it's like a multi-stage process, you have other people involved, all the things.
Yeah. So for the interviews, I would, when you're kind of planning, I would write down the questions you need the answers to. So you don't have to ask the typical questions, but you need to ask the questions that you need to know the answer to either for the position or for your company. So maybe that's like a very specific question on like, have you used this kind of coffee machine? What's the amount of like the maximum number of customers you've served in an hour? Whatever it is for your company. I always liked to lead with having the person I was interviewing talk about what they wanted out of this job. Like, because usually it's reverse. Like you go into an interview and people are like, asking a bunch of questions, and then at the end they ask if you have any questions. And there you go. There's going to be a webinar.
Oh, that was for Belinda.
For
Belinda, sorry.
I like to flip it a little bit because I feel like I want to know why people want to work here. It's not just about what I want. Them telling me why they want to work here will tell me a lot about them. right? And so, but you also want to get your questions answered, the specific questions answered. I always found that like the typical interview questions did not work for me. They just weren't specific enough. But I think they work. I think they work for jobs that are like a lot of customer service without a lot of other required skills and knowledge. But every company is different. So you can kind of pick and choose from that, but definitely you will forget the questions if you don't ask them. I mean, if you don't write them down, speaking from experience. So write down the questions that you definitely want the answers to.
What I've also seen, just to add a little more on that, Janet, is like you can create like a little chart for yourself. And for example, yes, you have all of the questions that you want to ask, reflecting what it is or what you're looking for. And then since you're going to probably interview more than one person, serve that as a side note, just to have a chart and number it like from 1 to 5 and give them like, do they need like first question, there it was like poor answer, like, you know, poor, good, excellent answer. And then that way you can keep track of everyone, if that helps.
Yeah, as we not in the beginning, but as we went on, we would have other team members sit in on the interview sometimes. Because a lot of times they ask good questions that you don't ask, and just sometimes having 2 people there, not more than 2, because then it's a little bit it's like a little bit weird. Like just it's a little intimidating and you don't want to create that environment. But yeah, just having somebody else there to help facilitate and ask questions that you maybe wouldn't have thought of or didn't pick up on to add.
And at the same time makes your team feel like they're part of the process and they will feeling more how can I say, more accepting of this new person, and they can say like, no, we don't see like ourselves working with this person for so and so. And that's really important too, because as Tina says before, nobody wants to go to work with somebody that they don't like or in a space that they don't like. That's going to reflect on the service they're going to be giving to your customers at the end of the day.
Yeah. And it also helps that the person you're interviewing get a little taste of your team, right? Like this is who you're going to be working with, because ultimately, like you want to give them the information they need to know to figure out if they want to work there, because it's better to get that information out there in the beginning and be honest about it, because why create a situation where you're hiring someone and they come in and they're like, what happened? This is not at all what it was presented to be, right? And so, you know, giving them that, you know, they also are making a decision there. It's not just you.
Just adding to that, just some past experience being in corporate. When you invite your leaders or your team members to be a part of that panel, because maybe I've had situations where we've have a spot that we keep having to fill because either they're not meshing with that team, you know, your cook or whomever it is, and you value that person's opinion, you value their strengths that they bring to, you know, your company. So you definitely don't want to lose them. So bringing them into that table to help you vet that person that's going to, like you said, working directly with them goes a long ways, because I definitely have had, you know, had that where I don't want to upset my chef or dishwasher or whatever the case may be.
Yes, absolutely. That's a great point. Do you have anything else from the paper that they want to talk about, share? No.
I can share just like some things that I'm kind of going through at the moment, not with my own work, but I work for a startup bakery. And it's funny because a lot of these things are things that we just are kind of touching on now, which is we've been trying to have like team meetings and like individual meetings, which I'm liking. But I do notice that the owner is having a hard time kind of like relinquishing tasks to us, to their employees. And so we had to have like a discussion about like how much they trust us and like also like what training looks like and then what it looks like to kind of step back and like let your employees kind of do the job that you've trusted them and tasked them to do, without like just coming in and like taking over everything. So it's made me like kind of hyper aware of like how I can also, or just like how I would want to manage a team of people. And also how it's like when you have your own business, you can also be very attached. It's like your baby. So to like trust someone else to do it, or to, you know, to maneuver in something that you've built, you know, that you've worked so hard to build, is like very hard to do. So it's cool that we're going through this, and I get to see like also what they might be feeling and how it's, you know, a struggle for them to kind of like let go and like and trust that they've hired good people, and also share and communicate with them better ways for them to communicate with me and how I like to receive feedback. It's also nice that I just work in an environment where that conversation can be had. So yeah.
Also, what you just said right there was a great point that I didn't say, asking people how they like to receive feedback, right? Because everybody's different and things, people process things like mentally in a different way, right? Whether it's like verbally like this, or do you mind writing that down for me? Because I just feel like I could process it better if I read it and then we could talk about it, that kind of thing. It also is something that people don't do. So the fact that, you know, like your employer does that, or if you do that, like that's makes people feel like you actually care about them and what their needs are as well. So yeah, I love that point, Jasmine. Thanks so much for sharing that.
And I think that also applies for the training, when you're doing the training, because people learn differently. I'm really like hands-on. Like you can tell me things a million times. If I don't do it myself, it's not gonna go in, I'm not gonna process it. So that's also like it applies not only on the feedback, I would say also on the training. It will save you so much time.
Yep. Yeah, so I mean, just really getting to know your team, right? Like, how do they do things? How can you make it so they can succeed? You know, and especially like as we learn a lot more about like neurodiversity, like people learn in such different ways, and it can really impact, you know, what they can do with their skills, how they learn it.
Any other questions or comments?
I kind of want to comment on Tina when you mentioned the recognition between group members. I had the chance to experience both in different workplaces, one with the realtor job I had, and then right now with the nonprofit. There was a lot of favoritism happening at the realtor. I felt like no matter how much work I completed each day or how well I worked with customers, um, I wasn't really recognized for the work I would do on a daily basis compared to some of my other employees. And now with the nonprofit I work, I am always being recognized whenever I work well, or how I'm also in a supervisor role for our interns. I I try to be very mindful. I try not to be saying I try not favor anyone. I want to keep everyone on the same level, but I do recognize them whenever one intern it takes a lead on a project, and I recognize them for their hard work, and then calling it out whenever they're all working together for one task and saying how amazing job they're doing and what impact they're doing within the organization, and saying what type of being able to complete a job and seeing them grow since they joined the team. So that's one thing I've been working on myself, making sure I don't be that employer where I may favor one over another person, because I was in that shoe and I don't want to have my future employees or staff to feel that way towards me.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And, I will leave you with one story before we sign off, and nobody else has any other questions. And this really is a story in delegation and trusting people. So in about 18 months ago, Tony, who is at the cafe more than me, had a really bad accident. He was hit head on and he was in the hospital. His hips were shattered. Like, he was basically like didn't walk for 6 months. So, this happens and we run like a brick and mortar. We run hot and cool. And we basically he could not do anything for months. And so I was trying to run it, but also, we're married and we have 3 kids. And so like I had to really focus elsewhere. So we really had to rely on our team to do everything and to really put the whole business in their hands and trust they were going to do it. And they did do it, and they did a great job, because prior to that, we had basically delegated it to them, right? We had said, like, you can do this. You don't need us. If you need us, come get us. Like, we're here. You never know what's going to happen in your business. That story is a little bit tragic, but it could be anything, right? You could be focusing on a totally different part of your business, and you want to be able to trust that this other part of your business that somebody else is now running is going to be run properly. And the trust you put in people, the training that they get from taking the leadership is more than the training that you could give them by just talking about it, right? Like Maybelline said, doing things hands-on, creating relationships with customers, like knowing how the business works. It may not happen right away. Like this may not happen when you hire your first team or your first employee, but over time, having somebody that can do almost what you do is so important in being able to grow your business. And also just be able to have, I'm sure you'll hear about this in the talk about work-life balance, to have a work-life balance and to be able to grow a business, but at the same time, take care of yourself, have a life outside of it, and, be gone if you need to be gone. So just something to think about as you work towards building your team. And totally fine now. So
yeah, that was something, because I know that he does like a lot of the operation, and probably for him was a person that moves a lot and being constricted. I can imagine how frustrated could have been for him, like not being able to do so. So I'm glad that he's on the other side.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any final thoughts, or we close it here and see each other tomorrow at 4?
Well, I just have a quick question, because unfortunately I won't be able to make it tomorrow either. So is tomorrow just a review of the worksheets that we're going through? I missed that part in the beginning. Okay, so I'll just populate that.
Also, for you, Jana and Jasmine, just email me. I'm going to put my, if you have any questions, specific questions on this topic or any topic, but I'm happy to help you out separately if you have a question.
Thank you so much.
Well, any other questions? Thank you then. Have a good evening. I'll see you tomorrow at 4.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.